The following is a presentation of the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
From the birthplace of modern winemaking, Sonoma, California, welcome to the Winemakers. Local experts Sam Couturi, Bart Hansen, and Brian Casey invite you to listen in as they discuss all facets of winemaking. So sit back, pour yourself a glass, and let's hear what the guys have to say this week.
Oh man, that was a drizzler.
It was a drizzler, but a nice ting.
Texas drizzler.
Texas drizzler. Texas drizzler.
Oh my god.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Winemakers.
Yeah, it was some Texas drizzle. Been a while, Bart, since
we've sat down together, I guess.
Yeah, no shit. And I actually got a couple texts or people reached out through Instagram this morning while I was sitting on the toilet, asking me, how come no show? Why no show? I said we're doing one today, but Bart was gone, Sam was gone, so it was just a little challenging last week to put something together.
Yeah, you were running the place here.
Yeah,
I mean, Jasmine keeping an eye on you.
Yeah.
Shout out to Jasmine in her new position here at Winery 16600.
Yep, doing a great job.
So you know, sometimes we miss a week.
Yeah,
It makes all of you out there want us more.
it's not like we're getting paid.
Right, exactly. So
You want to pay us? Hey, if you want to start a subscription model and so that we're making thousands of dollars, I'll show up and put something on.
yeah, I think we've talked about this before. It's just people said, why don't you have sponsors? And it's like, well, if we have a sponsor, then we can't talk shit about them.
That's true.
Right? You know?
Yeah, and ads suck, man. Nobody wants
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Follow the link below to our Patreon.
Right, exactly. Exactly. So Brian, tell me how you found our guests.
Okay, so Rhone Rangers weekend was this weekend at Cline Cellars. Shout outs to Fred and Megan and Hillary for putting it on this year again. Great event. Get to see all the Rhone people and don't have to drive too far. Sorry.
Don't how about don't have to go on a cruise in France?
Yeah, that's a sore spot. So originally there was supposed to be a dinner, like the last couple years, I think, where it wasn't last year, I think the year before, like they honored to do the person of the year or whatever. And the girl in the fig at Sweet D would host the event, but there wasn't an event this year. So Hillary said, let's all get together at Swim Club, Valley's restaurant over on Arnold, and just bring some wine and hang out so we can all just kind of see each other before the event. So I was one of the first people there drinking wine, and then I see these three guys sitting down at the end of the table.
And did you say you guys obviously aren't from these parts?
Well, I honestly didn't know.
Our horses.
To tell you the truth, they kind of look familiar to me, and I'm like, fuck, I feel like I know those guys, but I don't know how. So then I think I just sat down and started talking to them and had a good conversation, and then before I left, said, hey, you guys want to come on and talk about Texas? Because we honestly don't drink enough Texas wine, and what you were telling me about distribution and the challenges of getting Texas wine into California. And we know people in Texas, and we know you make good wine. So yeah, and then had a good day yesterday, had a good event.
Well, and Texas is a huge consumer of wine.
We absolutely love people from Texas. Anytime they come to our tasting room, they're super nice people. They usually have money. They love wine. It's easy for us to ship into Texas, and so it's a no-brainer for us.
So, I mean, let's start with let's start with who you guys are and the name of the winery, and then we'll get into the other stuff.
Yeah, and Andrew and Brad, but maybe tell us, what your official titles are, and what you actually do at the winery, and then we'll kind of get into the history of it. And 30
I'll start. I'm Andrew Sides. I'm the founder of Lost Straw Wines. We're a medium-sized producer of wine in the hill country, but we started growing grapes in the early 2000s. Our family did, Prior to that, we're just generational farmers, cotton, peanuts, corn, all the things that you grow in a row to make some money. And
are you still farming some of that stuff?
Yes, we actually farm everything that we produce for our wine production. We farm ourselves. And
No, but do you still farm some of those other crops?
on a smaller scale. And my uncle is one of the, I would say, like great pioneers of Texas, but he still farms a little bit of cotton, but there's just not enough water, and it's the prices and everything's dictated by the government, and it's tough. But there was a big, surge of vineyard plantings in the early 2000s, but we were a big part of that and the growth that happened then.
Cool.
But who was it, you, or was it someone in your family that said, "Hey, let's plant some grapes"?
Honestly, it was Andy, my uncle. We were experiencing like really tough years with like prices, and water was starting to, everything's like groundwater sourced from the high plains. So it's all Ogallala Aquifer, one of the largest aquifers in North America, runs, is under the ground in that area, and there's pockets of it that started running out of water, and our well sizes were really shrinking, and it takes a lot of water to grow peanuts and even cotton, and less water to grow grapes, and less land. So it was kind of a natural transition that started happening.
So was the idea originally to just plant grapes and sell them to people?
That was originally the idea.
Yeah. Okay. And then
about 6 years later, the wine industry in Texas really started growing at that time, and there was a large group of wineries that were starting to look for Texas fruit, try to source Texas fruit, and we had gained some notoriety for quality, and I think that we were some of the first vineyards to start planting some different varieties that were a little bit more sustainable in our semi-arid desert climate.
Yeah, because what kind of advice did you get when you went to go put in grapes? What were people telling you that you should plant?
Well, the other farmers were telling us we were idiots, that we were planting
to plant grapes at all.
Yeah, it was just almost like an interesting, like, why are you doing that? You guys have lost your mind. Yeah, it's change.
Brownfield doesn't take change super well.
Yeah. So then, how did you decide what to put in the ground?
Whose
decision was that?
Well, I will say that there's a lot of trial and error that happened, and not just in our vineyard, but across the industry early on. I mean, in the High Plains, we probably have 8,000 producing acres of vineyard, but there's probably like 80 varieties planted, and a lot of them are not in large scale. It's just like people were trying to figure out like what's going to grow here, what can I sell to wineries that are going to be able to market this variety that no one's ever heard of. And you talk about consumer base in Texas. Well, everyone in Texas for the last 50 years has been drinking California wine or West Coast wine. So the varieties that they're familiar with aren't necessarily the ones that grow well.
Chardonnay, Cabernet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what did you guys put in the ground initially?
Initially, we planted Tempranillo, Viognier, Merlot was pretty shortly thereafter. Expanded to a whole nother vineyard site where we did start planting a lot of Rhone varieties, and that's when we started working with Grenache, Roussanne, Marsanne, Picpoul, other varieties that were starting to have some success, hotter climate varieties that were having success in our vineyard and other places, and then really started focusing on those varieties that would be, what I say, more sustainable for farming in Texas. And a lot of people don't understand, like, continental climate very different than coastal climate, so we have different weather patterns every single year. We have hot years, wet years, dry years, cold years. Like
21, you guys had frost issues, right?
Yeah, we had. So I think one of the most fascinating things, I think it was in October of 2020, we had a freeze event where it got down to roughly 16 degrees for 3 or 4 straight days, and then what was remarkable about that is in August, just prior to that, it was over 100 degrees for 30 days.
Right.
That's 2 months difference.
We had 3 days over 115, which we were hanging stuff. That was a Halloween freeze. And we were hanging, like, people were still hanging Halloween because sorry. Yeah.
No, you're all good.
But yeah, we were still hanging fruit Halloween that year, which is like super, super late. That never happens in Texas. We had that 115-degree spell, and it just stalled everything out. And then a hard freeze in October. It's kind of crazy for us.
100-degree swings in 2 months, pretty wild, but it's not uncommon. So,
but do those weather patterns that are there, and they're probably obviously changing because of climate change, do they affect those other crops your family was growing before in the same ways, or are those other crops a little more resilient to weird weather patterns?
My dad went bankrupt farming cotton. We got hailed out 3 years in a row.
Yeah, okay.
And so we experienced hailstorms.
Right.
The wind is, it's beneficial in the vineyard and in the high plains especially, and even in the hill country. But, I mean, we get some extreme wind in the high plains, like 60, 70 mile an hour. Right. It's tornado. It's like the southern, part of Tornado Alley in the whole central plains. So,
and that's where you're actually growing grapes in wind like that?
Oh, yeah.
So, holy shit. So row positioning is like crucial, right? Or can you even, is it pretty consistent which way the wind is going, so you can kind of position your vine so
we still plant mostly like east west, so that the summer the sun affects ripening and things like that. But most of our storms come from the Rockies and build, and then they come, and then you have this weather phenomenon where from our Gulf Coast, you have low pressure coming from there, and you have high pressure coming from the mountains, and it all meets right there. That's why tornadoes and all that happen up through the plains. That's where the high pressure and low pressure meet. So,
right.
And we are just situated right at the south tail end of it. But
Jesus.
So, were you a wine drinker before all this?
Not at all. So my family started when we started planting grapes. I was in high school, and I found it fascinating to grow grapes because, right in that area, that's like the Bible Belt. There's more churches than convenience stores in that area, and we were a dry county. You couldn't even go to the gas station and buy
up
alcohol.
until when?
Until 2007.
Holy shit!
Yeah, but I thought it was pretty cool. I'm 17, and we're planting grapes to make some booze. I thought it was I was like, man. In my family, I grew up in Southern Baptist Church, and we're very. It's nobody can drink. It's taboo. We're not doing that. And so when we started growing grapes, I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. So I started actually studying wine and varietal selection, what we were planting and why it was different than anything I'd seen on the grocery store shelf or in a restaurant, and started learning about it. Just became a student to varietal selection, farming, grapes, and winemaking.
When you say dry county, what does that mean? That it's you can't buy alcohol on Sundays, or you're talking about completely none of the stores?
We legit. So when I was in high school, if you wanted to, and I grew up in small town West Texas, football is a big deal, but you had to get beer or wine or whiskey, whatever you want to buy. You had to buy it through a bootlegger, and a bootlegger would go to a county and they would purchase booze and bring it back. This is in the early 2000s, man. It was all pretty wild that we were still in the Prohibition era rules of consumption of alcohol.
So I did some sales trips when I worked for larger wineries, and Texas was one of the places they'd send me, and I was always blown away. They'd say across the street, that's a dry county. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? And it's it's just that. It's a dry county. He said, but the people can just walk here and buy it. And he goes, but that's not the point. It's just the beliefs. It's the rules. Right?
Yeah, it's weird. And it was, it was pretty archaic, but in a lot of ways it makes sense just because that whole area of Texas and really the whole Central Plains was some of the last big areas to be settled in the country. And so just laws kind of followed suit. They were later.
So what changed it?
I honestly think that growing grapes in Texas and producing Texas wine really created an urgency to change the laws, especially in those counties and that were growing grapes for wine production. And I have no statistical data to support that, but nothing else was changing it. For 20, 30, 40,
Right.
50 years, like nobody was making a push to like be able to produce wine or anything in those areas or be able to sell it.
But if people are planting something that other people want, and then it provides jobs,
Local
maybe puts
economy.
money into
Absolutely.
the economy, then that changes minds, right?
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, I think, it hampered Texas for a really long time. I mean, there was a lot of people that were planting grapes in the 60s and 70s, but there's really no ability or market to like sell it within the state. And production at that time was from very few like different wineries, but it was all just like grocery store wine because everybody sold through a wholesaler. Nobody sold direct to consumer, and everybody was just buying the bad bulk juice from here,
Right.
bottling it, sweetening it, putting it on the bottom shelf, and trying to just volume game.
Yeah.
And so it kind of that hurt the Texas wine industry in the beginning, and then it like really. What was interesting is there was just this like awakening by like some Texas consumers where they're like, oh, there's like Texas grapes now. I'm gonna go try Texas wine, and then you had this like big, almost like feudal standoff between like the wineries that had been buying bulk juice and bringing it in, and the wineries that wanted to be legit and making wine from Texas grapes. And it kind of came to a head several years ago, but through legislation, that kind of stuff works itself out.
But I mean, and I can see that happening because people from Texas are proud they're from Texas, right? And they're proud of what they do, and they're proud of what they grow and farm. And so, you could see how people, at least I could see how people would do that.
Let's do it ourselves.
Let's do it ourselves.
Right.
Because we can do it better than anybody else. Right?
Yeah.
Am I wrong there?
No, there's
not at all.
definitely some of that.
And I mean as a compliment,
Sure, the proud Texas kind of mantra.
Of course,
definitely
I'm from
carries and
California,
follows.
so.
But I mean, I will say it. I mean, it took a decade for like Texas wineries that were actually producing like really quality wines to convince Texas consumers that it was okay to enjoy a Texas wine.
Wow, really?
Yeah, and it was just, you have a whole like the baby boomer, that whole group of people. They grew up drinking stuff from the West Coast, and the grittier and the residual sugar that was in the wine and the more tannin, high alcohol, like that's what they were taught was a good wine.
Right.
Yeah. Can you give a shout out to some of just a couple of the people you think that were kind of changed the game?
In the Texas wine industry.
Started making actual good Texas wine, and
Yeah, for sure. Like Kim McPherson in Lubbock, his dad was Doc McPherson and was a huge reason that like any research ever even happened through a university program in Texas. And he is for sure one of the pioneers of like the Texas wine industry. And then Kim, opened up a winery in Lubbock, which is tough because it's still like not a wine drinking culture, and there's not a lot of people up there, but he makes legit like good varietal selection wines for that area and did a really good job of doing it. And he's like kind of spun off like a bunch of winemakers that have interned through his place that have helped like have an imprint on the industry for sure. And then people like William Chris, what Chris and Bill Blackman did, coming together back in I think 2008 was when they got started, and they are probably, between them and like Grape Creek, are probably the two wineries that I would say had the most influence in like learning how to sell wine DTC, like, and bringing traffic to the area, understanding like marketing was like going to be a huge deal for the industry, but also learning how to like get people on site to sell wine
right
from the winery.
Because is that the goal for you guys? You want to sell it all out of the tasting room if possible, or through wine club?
Man, I think the goal right now for Texas is, here's a crazy statistic for you. So Texas is the number 2 wine consuming state in the U.S.
Yeah.
behind California.
Yep.
They consume the most wine. But 97% of wine consumed in Texas is not Texas wine.
Yeah.
Wow.
So 3% of wine that is consumed in Texas is actually Texas wine. and we have one of the largest consumer bases in the country.
Yeah.
So I think the goal for Texas is, one, to educate consumers in our own state that what we're doing is legitimate and it's interesting, and it is not. We are not trying to be like another winery. What we're doing is ours, and it can only be ours because we grow
Texas
grapes
wine.
here. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what kind of our mission has been, and it's probably the singular most unified mission amongst producers in Texas right now is trying to get more Texans to believe in what we're doing and consume the wines that we're producing.
Well, yeah, because what an untapped market. I mean,
Yeah,
talk
in our
about
backyard.
opportunity. You got millions of people.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I tell the story all the time. There was a distributor that had started his own wing of a distributorship out in New York City, and about 4 or 5 years ago, he invited a few Texas producers out there to go taste wine, and I mean it was like overwhelming success. Like in the New York market, which is one of the toughest markets, in the hardest markets to talk about anything in. But they found it so interesting in what we're doing, and they thought wow, this is amazing wine. Y'all are producing this at high elevation farming. It was easier to sell wine in New York than it was in Austin, which is 45 minutes from our winery.
Yeah. Well, I can kind of see that though, but I can only speak for myself. I like trying something that's different or cool, or but I'm living in a bubble where I have access to all this other shit. So then when you tell me I can try pick pool from High Plains or whatever, I'm like, fuck yeah, I need some of that.
Yeah.
And I can see people in New York kind of being like that too. They tend to drink a lot of international wine. I mean, they just want to.
Yeah, they're like, oh, Algerian cab. I want to taste that.
100%.
Let's put that on our list.
Yeah. Aged in amphora, buried in the ground, covered in beeswax. Hell yeah, need some of that. So at what point do you decide to just start making wine?
So 2000, I actually got a civil engineering degree at Texas Tech, and I knew there was a time in my life I was like, I'm just going to farm grapes and make wine. I was going to open a winery up in the High Plains. My uncle was kind of like, I don't know if that's a good idea, man. Go get your big boy job, and if you still want to do this, it'll be here when we can do it.
Right, because you got to feed mouths, and
that was very early on in the industry too. So it was this whole thing could just flame out, and we may be gone and do nothing. But I worked as an engineer behind a desk for 3 years. That was all I needed to know that I wanted to go back to growing grapes and learn how to make wine. So started doing that while I was still working. And so 2012, we produced our own vintage. That was the first year that we made a wine under the Lost Straw label.
Wait, but you got to... This wine's great, by the way. Yeah. I don't know. What is it that we're drinking?
It's called Hill Country Blanc. It's a white blend. It's 40% Viognier, 40% Marsanne, 20% Claret Blanche.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
We're at the Rhone Ranger deal, so it fits the bill.
It fits my palate, too. But you got to get all the equipment and everything and build a whole facility. You guys have that kind of money where you're or are you doing this stuff at a crush pad
not,
facility?
Man. We're we started out making wine out of, I say Kim McPherson. That's where we started I started making my first wines out of that facility.
Right.
And then I brought Brad on shortly a few years later, who had bounced around. He'd made wine in California, New Zealand.
Oh, yeah, we're going to get to Brad. Don't you worry.
Yeah,
I'm just waiting in line here. It's all good.
Yeah. And, Brad, I'd show Brad these, winery designs because I had, I'd made 2 vintages of wine, so I knew what I was doing. Yeah. And I would, take it to him, hey, we're gonna put tanks over here, and we're going to, put a, transfer system right here. It's yeah, I don't know about that. That's not going to work very well. But
how are you going to get forklift this out of there?
Yeah.
How did you guys meet?
Honestly, just through the Texas wine industry. He was actually making wine at another place, and then he knew that I was about to build our own facility, and I already had another winemaker that was committed to the job, and we were rolling on it, and he found out. And we knew each other through the industry.
Bit, yeah. I was actually a wine club member at Lost Straw.
Cool.
Well, I was making wine down the road, but I was a wine club member with them. Right. And I've been working with his uncle. I knew his uncle Andy before I knew Andrew. Like I met Andy in 2014. Took a dog off of his vineyard that showed up, beat the shit. Still have that dog. He's a pretty good old little dog. Yeah,
that's awesome.
That was like my first time with Andy.
Yeah.
What's his
I don't
name?
know. Raiden.
Yeah, he
like
didn't
Mortal
want to say
Kombat.
Raider, but like
They were calling him Raider. It was in Lubbock, so
Yeah.
Texas Tech, Red Raiders. They were
Right.
calling him Raider, and I was like, I'm not gonna keep this dog name Raider. I got no tie to Texas Tech.
Exactly.
I play a lot of video games. So I was like, Raiden's pretty fun. He's a blue healer. Raiden shot the blue lightning in Mortal Kombat. So,
And where did you grow up?
I grew up mostly in New Jersey.
You don't sound like you're from New Jersey.
No, everyone tells me that when I say I'm from New Jersey, or if I tell them I live in Texas, they also are like, "You don't sound like you're from Texas." I was born in Puerto Rico. Lived in Ohio for a while. My dad was in the Coast Guard. He was from San Antonio. My family, they were part of like settling the town of Bandera in Texas, so deep Texas history on my dad's side. But he was about the first person to leave Texas from my family. He went to the Coast Guard Academy and did 26 years in the Coast Guard, so bounced around quite a bit. Cape May, New Jersey is the largest training base that is not the academy for the Coast Guard.
There's a Coast Guard base in Petaluma, just outside Petaluma.
Yeah. Actually, well, I don't know if we need to go into the whole story. My dad was buddies with the guy that did the first ever like jump out of a helicopter, and it was here in like the San Francisco Bay.
Yeah.
And he like got his ass chewed out, and then like a month later they came back and like, hey, well that like worked. Maybe you could like build a whole program around this. So I always found that interesting.
Maybe
We
that's a
come
way
out
to
and
sell
visit them. They
lives,
live
save
out
lives.
this way. Yeah.
That's cool.
But yeah, I fell totally backwards into the wine industry. I moved to New Zealand in 2007, just kind of to delay real life. I did not know the wine industry was even a thing. Like at that point,
Why New Zealand?
I graduated college. I wanted to go somewhere before like finding a real job, and they speak English there, and it was a free 1-year work visa. So it was pretty
What did you
easy.
think you were going to do?
I thought I'd be a
work?
teacher. Like my mom was a teacher. When my dad retired from the Coast Guard, he was a teacher. I was an English major in college. I have one of my sisters is a teacher. Like I have a whole bunch of teachers in the family. But my mom had told me, she was like, wait till you're 30 to teach. If you try to teach when you're like 24 or 25, you'll just kind of go crazy. All these kids will think you're a real adult, but you're not a real adult. But you got to pretend to be one every day.
Yeah.
She was like,
Man, that's great advice.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that when you're parenting either.
yeah. But she was like, they won't understand that you're not an adult. So like you need to delay. And so yeah, I went to New Zealand and just kind of bummed around. And I literally at the time probably only knew like Franzia came in a bag and Rossi came in a jug. That was about my experience with wine at the time. But I got down there and learned that it was a whole thing, and thought it was pretty cool. I befriended a guy down there and kind of slept on his couch for a couple weeks around harvest time, helped out in the winery just a tiny bit, knew nothing about what I was doing. I was just hosing bins down and running a squeegee.
And what winery was that?
That was Spy Valley. And then I was coming back to the States when my visa ran out. I had a job. I was going to go teach English in Taiwan. And that was 2008 when that Fukushima earthquake hit and sent the tsunami through all of like Southeast Asia. And so that school like shut down for a couple months. So I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. And my buddy, his name's Spencer Spetnagel. He's a great guy. He's at Durant Vineyards up in the Willamette. He was he was a winemaker at King Estate for a long time up there. But he had worked at Ravenswood here in Sonoma. And he was like, hey, I can get you just an intern, like harvest gig. I'm like, sure. I like knew nothing about Sonoma or that. And came and worked that one harvest and was like hooked. They hired me on full time.
And so wait a minute, what year was that?
2008.
So that was Constellation had purchased them at that point, right?
Yes, yeah.
And it was out at the big facility?
Yeah, at the quarry,
Yeah.
just south of Cline where we were yesterday.
Yeah.
I think they built that facility in like 2002 or 2003 maybe, through Constellation.
And so who was the winemaker's work that you worked with then? Was it
Jen Bellows
Yeah.
and Stuart Henry.
Yeah, cool.
And then Peter Mathis was the GM there.
Right.
So yeah, Jen was awesome. Like, I knew like nothing, but I was like hooked. I was in, and Jen was like so great with me for the whole time I worked there. Like super patient, answered all my questions. I'm sure I had a million, just like to her probably dumb questions, but like she loved it, and she gave me she taught me so much. The cellar team there's a great cellar team in place that I believe is still there, but they're just not making Ravenswood wine anymore.
Right. Yeah. My friend,
It's kind of a mystery, I think, what's going on, right?
well,
now?
Gallo owns the facility and they're making wine, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the question is, well, no, does Gallo own the
No, I think
Constellation owns the
kept that,
facility.
so they're probably still doing whatever, like
I mean,
Estancia and
right.
you know, I don't know.
So where were you living? When
Out
you were
here?
Yeah.
I lived in Novato for like close to a year, just an apartment down in Novato. I was spending a ton of time in San Francisco, so it was just a split between. And then I moved in with some guys. I was living for free. I slept on an air mattress underneath a staircase on a house right on Clay Street behind the Sonoma Inn.
Okay.
And the owners of that house got foreclosed on. I was telling them yesterday as we drove by it, telling Andrew yesterday. The bank showed up one day and didn't realize we were like living in there. That was a whole little thing. So then I lived in like this like chicken coop just south of here on Broadway on, what is it, 12 or 112, like an old chicken coop.
Yeah.
Lived in that for a little bit, and then we moved up towards like Boys Hot Springs off Happy Lane. Like there's the old like pool hall up there.
Yeah.
That we used to hang out at.
And so you only ended up working there for one season at Ravenswood?
No, I ended up working there for, I think I did like 4 harvests.
Oh, wow.
Like 4 years. They hired me on after that first harvest, offered me a full-time job. And so at that point I was like, this is pretty cool. At least I just want to chase it down. I was having fun.
And then from then, where'd you go from there?
I went back to New Zealand for a harvest. I worked at Wairau River in Marlborough. And I came back. I was going to go work in Oregon. There was some change at Ravenswood. They offered me a bunch to come back for another harvest. So I came just for a harvest gig. And then from there, I was planning on going to Australia. What kind of drew me into wine, even though I just stayed in Sonoma the whole time mostly, but the whole idea initially, I was like, oh man, you can hop hemispheres and chase harvests. Like what a great tool to be able to like travel and like find community and like make money, like work.
But at some point you got to learn the other part of making wine, right?
Yeah. But yeah, I was thinking about going to Australia, and some people that I've been working with were going down there. We had a job lined up, or I had a job lined up, like in Perth, and I don't know. I ended up in Texas a bunch. Both my grandparents in Texas had passed away, so I was like in Texas and spending time with family. And I was like, man, like I always liked Texas. I always visited. It was pretty cool. And I ran around to some of the wineries and was like, man, there's actually like some interesting stuff starting to happen. Like this was 2010, 2011 maybe. And I was like, this is pretty neat. And so I started looking for a way to go down there
with your experience working internationally and, you know, for those wineries, that winery in California, you probably had a lot to offer.
Oh yeah. I mean, like,
Get a leg up on all the other idiots. I
mean, I learned pretty quickly going to Texas. Like a lot of the guys starting wineries and doing stuff like Andrew and all those guys, it was like, it was almost like being like a home brewer and then trying to start a brewery. Like you're trying to scale up, but you hadn't worked in a bigger place. So it's like harder to scale up when you don't know what those efficiencies, those bigger spaces look like. And having done like 4 years at Ravenswood, which was a purpose-built facility by Constellation that was like super efficient, state-of-the-art technology at the time.
I mean, that's Peter's thing, right? Peter was the design, the whole thing. And,
Yep. And yeah, having seen all that, it was a great leg up for when you get to Texas.
When
you're
he
like,
said,
we want
"Let's
to scale this up or do this." It's like, well, this is kind of like maybe the end game you could be if you got huge, but you at least like see it and can step it down a little, but you can see where those efficiencies need to be kept or built in. So yeah, I moved to Texas in 2011. To me, at the time, it was like, I was like, I could go to Australia or I could go to Texas. And it's pretty much like going to Australia. I can go for like a year, hang out with family, check out some wine. And if I don't like it, I can bounce back to California, Oregon, Washington.
How old were you?
How old would I have been then? Like 27-ish, 28. That was, I worked for a winery very briefly in Texas. It was more just a job to get my foot in the door. And then I had a whole side tangent where I moved to Austin and helped the guy scale up a sake company, making sake. Texas sake company.
How does that happen?
I was the winery I was at. I don't know, it wasn't just a great fit for me. And so I was looking for something to do within Texas. I was spending a lot of time in Austin, and found this guy that had just started his sake company, and he was scaling up from a homebrew operation. And
He's talking about not having any water. I mean, don't you need a lot of water for rice?
Well, so rice requires a lot of water. Texas has a huge rice growing area. It's out towards Houston on the Gulf Coast. So you can flood irrigate out there. There's a lot more water down there than where we're growing grapes. But yeah, Texas has they have a cool, like, storied history around rice. Like when the Japanese got interned in a lot of states, like Oregon took like a lot of the farming land from the Japanese during World War II. Texas was like, no, y'all have these like rice farms. Like they were very accepting and welcoming. They were like, we're not gonna intern people. There's a whole cool history of Texas and the Japanese and rice farmers and what they brought to the Gulf Coast.
Alcatraz or
We did that.
on,
They did it here.
Angel Island.
We did that here in Windsor. There was a internment camp in Windsor.
Yeah.
But anyway, I did that for a little bit, and then
Did the sake place ever take off?
it grew for sure. I didn't know what I was doing making sake. I'm not going to say I made like great sake or anything.
Yeah, we did a whole
but,
show on sake, and I mean, I had endless questions because when you start talking about the process, it was completely foreign to me. And
yeah, it's super neat. Like I was a one-man production show, and also going and
Polishing
pouring
that
sake
rice,
in grocery stores and hustling. Like it was a grind. But it was super fun. We sold that company to a brewery in Austin. It still exists. There's a tasting room. It's called Texas Sake Company, and it still exists. It's in Austin. But yeah, I got back to wine, so I started working for another winery in 2014 in Texas. Came on as the winemaker, making wine. Did a lot of work to get this facility up and running to where it probably should have been. Through that, got to know Drew a little bit, and yeah, I think it was 2016 when I found out he was starting to put a winery in. I was a wine club member with him, and I was like, hey, I love your wines. I love what you're doing. Like, I'd love to have a shot to come in, help build this facility and get going. So
yeah, how'd you cut out the other person? Did you have like a death match?
Well, I will say, it's Texas wine industry is probably no different than a lot of the other ones. It's very incestuous, and everyone starts small, and everyone kind of runs around and works out of different facilities, and everybody's trying to make it. There was a couple that the girl was a viticulturalist and actually was working with my uncle, and the guy was going to come work with me, and then they decided that they were going to kind of start their own thing and start their own little consulting business between winemaking and growing grapes. So he came in one day and was like, yeah, I'm going to start my own thing. I don't want to, work for anybody. I was like, okay, cool. And Brad, like, it just honestly was just one of those like very serendipitous things. At the same time, he wanted to get away from the place he was at, just kind of explore a new adventure. And he knew that we had the ability to make some of the best wines in the area just because we were working with the best fruit. And, we kind of saw eye to eye on a lot of things. I always appreciated Brad because he knew we were on a shoestring budget and we needed to like grow it smart and organically to some degree. And we made a lot of really good wine out of like a not world-class facility. I'll say that.
Yeah. And in terms of farming, what kind of input, Brad, do you have in terms of like, tons per acre and the quality of the fruit? I mean, do you get input on the,
oh yeah, for sure. I mean,
fruit of like, hey, you guys, we don't need 6 tons per acre. Can you start farming 3?
Yeah, I mean, one of the big draws to going to work at Lost Draw was,
no pun intended.
Yeah, no pun. Was like, I did consider Andy, his uncle at the time. I was like, this guy's growing the best fruit in Texas that I see. Like, it'd be awesome to have the direct pipeline to everything there. Mm-hmm. And Andy is super open to anything. Like, you throw any idea out that you want to try. I mean, as long as it's reasonable. Yeah. Andy's been awesome to work with, and he's great with it. So yeah, I think it's taken years. Like when I came on with them in 2017, if I was like, hey, let's like, really aggressively shoot thin or something, they'd be like, nah, let's not. Like, but I think we built the trust over the years. Like, I honestly, 2017 was my first harvest with Lost Draw, and we were building that winery facility, and like all kind of construction projects, it drags and takes longer and longer and longer. And we kind of missed our timeline. Harvest kicked off, and our building like still was not ready to start processing grapes. So I like moved up to Lubbock for that harvest, and there was like a custom crush facility that his uncle was part of at the time, and like made everything through there. But it was great because I was on the crush pad like every night. I was out for every pick, which isn't always feasible when you're making wine in Fredericksburg, where we're 5 hours away from Lubbock. You can't necessarily be out there, but it was great to be able to like connect with Andy on a lot of that stuff, like in the moment when you're picking or needing to make quick decisions throughout harvest.
Your vineyard, like talk about soil and basically your climate there.
Yeah, Texas has 2 major AVAs, and the high plains that we've been talking about quite a bit is high elevation farming. It's anywhere between 34 and 3,800 feet above sea level. Wow. It's up on the plateau, the southern edge of the whole Great Northern Plains. But we get a great diurnal shift because of the elevation there. And we have hot days. We have a shorter growing season than they have out here on the West Coast, but it's all ancient seabed, so it's like limestone bedrock, and it's sandy loam to various depths to hit that limestone bedrock, but pretty calcareous in the areas where it's like broken off, especially around any kind of draw or dry creek bed, and definitely has an influence from a minerality standpoint on all the Rhone varieties and some of the even Spanish and Mediterranean varieties, which is very different than if you go to the hill country where we have our estate where all of our production is, and we do 7 acres of grapes at the estate in the hill country. It's about 1,700 feet above sea level, but it's all granite substrate. So there's like one of the largest granite outcroppings in the entire North American continent right there in the hill country. And so you have various different soil types from just years and millions of years of runoff to different rivers and streams and lakes. And so there's a lot of work right now being done by Texas and a couple of associations there to get tighter and smaller sub-AVAs inside of the Texas Hill Country, because it truly does have a lot more variation in that singular AVA than like the high plains. It's all ancient like seabed in the high plains, and there are differences and different nuances that could probably be explored from a sub-AVA standpoint, but in the hill country it needs to happen faster because there's vastly different just soil composition from like very short distances apart. So there's a lot of work right now being done to kind of distinguish those, and I think we will start to see a lot more highlighting of those sub-AVAs in the next 10 years from the hill country. And honestly, most of the planting that's happening right now is in the hill country. It's interesting that 80% of our grape production currently is in the high plains, and all of the consumption and visitorship and tourism is happening in the hill country, but that's just because it's situated between the metropolitan areas of the state, so it's got closer access to people. And I think that's one of the other things that has somewhat hamstrung Texas as an industry, and has like something that we're overcoming, is like the traffic actually outpaced the quality of wine and the growth in the wineries. Like wine tourism traffic was like greater and higher at a point when the industry was just starting to take off. Instead of the quality driving the traffic, it was almost happened in reverse. Right. And so it just led to a lot of like decisions and, different wineries that came in that were subpar, but didn't matter, because there was just, the traffic was there. And there was a lot of people that came in just to take advantage of the cash grab because the traffic was there. And so you have all those different factors that kind of, keep the industry from like growing in the right way. And it's kind of, we're overcoming it now, but it's definitely been something that's held us back from a just overall quality across the industry standpoint. But, I'm not complaining that we've had good traffic,
Yeah. Well, and have some larger like wineries or companies like the Wine Group or Constellation seen what's going on and tried to plant a flag?
Yeah, there's always like these like silent rumblings, around these bigger conglomerates that they've started sniffing around at Texas. There's definitely been groups that have come out, especially and explored opportunities with brands that have vineyard acreage as well that's tied to the company. It's owned by the company. I think that was really starting to happen about 3 to 4 years ago, and then we've like hit this like global like wine consumption decline, and I think everybody right now is just kind of like in like let's just wait this shit out and see what happens. Right. But it's definitely there was definitely a time 2 to 3 years ago when you start hearing like these bigger national brands are kind of looking around to see what's going on in Texas.
Yeah. So maybe this little stop has saved you from a little bit of that, at least for now.
Yeah, it has. I think the one negative thing that's happened is I think, wine consumption that's really declined from a percentage standpoint greater in California than it really had in Texas. And Texas kind of like the trends are always about a year to 18 months behind what's happening in California or other places from a wine standpoint and industry standpoint. But there's been a lot of wineries and brands that are starting to look in Texas for like opportunity. Right. And so they're like trying to set up shop as like a winery which I think is going to further deplete the legitimacy of our region. And just because it's, we want Texas consumers to go out and have a Texas wine experience and not experience, a California winery that's in Texas.
Right. Absolutely. And you guys got to rally around maybe not necessarily letting that happen, but supporting your own Texas experience, right?
Yeah, and the associations are kind of our best opportunity to do that as far as just like, no, to be in this association, you have to do these things. This is the criteria.
Yeah.
And I think for the most part, that's helped at least curb some of the appeal for places like that coming in.
So what can we talk a little bit about, the distribution thing? Like
first, can you tell us what's in this wine we're drinking?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Brad, you want to hit it?
Sure, let's go. This is a 2022 GSM. It's about 50%. It's like 48% Grenache, 42% Syrah, 10% Mourvèdre. The Grenache comes from a vineyard called La Pradera that Andy farms up in the High Plains. The Syrah and Mourvèdre come off the vineyard that we take our name from, Lost Draw, planted on the Lost Draw. But for our reds, we ferment basically everything in oak foudres, just big oak tanks. Grenache, typically we're picking for rosé. We always try to keep a little bit to do red, pick it pretty early, ferment it in oak, just put it all in neutral. And then the Syrah and Mourvèdre, same thing, fermented in oak. They get a kiss of new oak on them, about 20% new French oak. But ferment and age them all separately, and then we kind of build the blend every year for the GSM.
Tweak it a little bit every year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it always changes. Our goal, our shared goal, has always been to be a Grenache heavy GSM. It's a little pet peeve of ours when we go places and like, this is our GSM, and it's like 62% Mourvèdre, like
that's
17 Syrah, 8% Grenache, and like I get it. It's still it's a GSM, but we always wanted to be a Grenache heavy one, and so that's what changes for us every year. Just because Grenache has been a little fickle for us, at least in terms of making like a really kick-ass red wine.
Right.
Well, when they started planting those varieties in California, at least around this area, it was always very high in Syrah and just little bits of Grenache and Mourvèdre. Mm-hmm. And it took years to get that to turn, and
you think that was consumer driven? Like the consumer wanted like a bigger, like more tannic one?
I think it was just a little bit of an ignorance thing,
seriously.
Right? It was just an ignorance thing. And we're fortunate that there was Syrah decline, and but it also Syrah planted in the wrong places, and So we're just, kind of coming into that. Now people are planting with intention, as opposed to the Syrah was starting to get popular, and Syrah was going to be the next Merlot, right?
Yeah.
And Merlot was going to be the next Cabernet, right? And so now when people are planting it, they're planting it Grenache driven,
Well, so pretty. So we have that conversation all the time around here. I tell people we use Syrah in our GMS blend, almost like salt and pepper or spice when you're cooking. Like it's judiciously, it's to add a little structure and backbone. But if you put too much in, it just buries that really pretty Grenache. So it's kind of pointless. But people just think of GSM, then like third. Like you just, it's a formula. You just throw it all in there together, and it just works for some reason. But yeah,
the Syrah especially here in a warmer growing area out here, the Syrah just dominates everything.
yeah.
And so
What's interesting about Texas is like we use blending as a absolute tool every single vintage because we have so much varietal variation, and the weather patterns are so different that like the wine component for like a Mourvedre, Syrah, or Grenache, like it may be different in the wine just based on how it reacted to the vintage.
Right.
And so we have to use that blending as a tool in the end to kind of pull the coolest pieces of the vintage through the variety. And it's a fun process. Like we have a lot of fun blending the GSM every year.
So you get involved with that? You get to sit in and do the blending trials?
Yeah, there's not a wine that we blend that Brad and I don't put our mark on together.
We touch every wine together. We go through. We do all blending trials together. Andrew's palate's incredible. I think it's better than my palate. But we do everything together on all these, and the blends are our favorite because even like we have a ton of just like single vineyard, single variety wines, and so you don't really have room a whole lot in those if you're going to try to tweak it. I mean, you can a little bit on some blending, but when we're doing all these single vineyard, single variety wines, the blends get fun for us.
So how many SKUs do you guys have?
We've condensed it to about 25.
Yeah.
A lot of it's allocated wine, and then we have a few distribution SKUs. And when I say a few, we have like 6 that we wholesale, and then the rest is all sold DTC and in the tasting room and wine club.
And then what do you guys drink? Like you're home reaching for something. What are you reaching for?
That's not yours.
That's not yours.
I actually prefer white wine to red wine, and I think a lot of that happened when we started making wine initially. I always found it pretty fascinating that you could find flaws in white wine a lot easier than you could find them in red wine. And I think I always make the joke to people because they're like, "Oh, you're a winemaker and you like white wine." And we, as a brand in Texas, our percentage of white wine production is probably higher than just about every other one. Like we make a lot of white wine, and a lot of it's just because like it's what we like to produce and drink. But it's like if you're making, to me, you can always like find the quality of a winemaker and their ability to like really showcase the fruit through white wine.
Yeah, there's transparency. I drink mostly white wine in my free time.
Yeah, it's like when you it's like when you take a girl home from the bar and you don't turn the lights off before you get naked. It's like different, you know.
You know what?
And I honestly have seen people drinking more white wine over the last year or two that come into the tasting room, and I don't think it's necessarily based on price points, but that has something to do with it a little bit. Is because typically the white wines are a little bit cheaper than the red wines because they're spending time in oak. But also, I think people like just sitting and drinking something that's delicious and it's cold and it's refreshing.
Yeah, and in Texas, like consumption habits are, I mean, it is more pleasant to drink a chilled, lean, white, crisp wine for about 8 to 9 months out of the year because of the setting that you're in drinking it. And I think that's a huge part of like your consumption and consumer behavior happens to like where you drink and what you eat. Yeah. And so that's why I prefer white wine.
How many cases of Picpoul Blanc do you guys do?
It's usually between like 600 and 800, depending on the vintage.
And where did the claret come in? How'd that all happen?
That actually happened through a buddy. I'll shout him out. Oh, Mike Nelson. He planted Claret Blanc in the hill country, which I could tell you, like growing white grapes that you're trying to retain acidity in the hill country is challenging. It's a hotter climate, more humidity, more disease pressure, higher pH soils. Like it's hard to grow those and really make them successful. But it's a variety that has worked for their brand. They're with Ab Astris, and they're right there in the hill country on the Pedernales River Basin, similar spot to where we are at the estate in Johnson City. And we did a trade. Like, there's a lot of that still happens in the industry. And we just, like, he wanted some Marsanne that we had, and I was like, we'll trade you some Marsanne for some Claret Blanc. And we produced it by itself and then blended it back, fermented it in some concrete just to kind of play with it, and then it worked out.
Yeah.
I like the tag on the Petite Syrah, real Texas wine. Do you have that on all the labels now, or?
Yeah, that's an interesting story. So
I mean,
we there was
loud and proud with that one.
Yeah.
There was a time that in 2021 we finally got legislation passed to where to put an AVA on a Texas wine, it had to be 100% sourced from that AVA. Prior to that, it only had to be 75. And we were battling this problem because we were like, there was a group of Texas wineries that were making 100% Texas wines, which is sad as an industry that we're having to put that claim out there that we're like, these wines are 100% Texas. And for a long time, a lot of people were abusing the rule of putting, Texas or an AVA on the wine and, bringing in a lot of wine from other places and backfilling it. So there was a group of wineries that started using real Texas wine and got it trademarked, and that was before the legislation happened. And you could only put that on the label if it was 100% Texas. So
that was, wasn't that Robert Mondavi that was doing that in the 50s and 60s? Was because at that time it only had to be 50% from your AVA, and so he was getting all this Lodi fruit and just blending it in, and it said Napa Valley on it.
Yeah, it's bullshit, right?
Yeah, well, and especially I think when you're starting and establishing an AVA or a region is like, hey,
and it's confusing to the consumer. They go out and they think they're supporting Texas agriculture, and they like feel good about like, I'm buying this Texas wine, I'm supporting my local farmers. Like, no, actually, like you're 75% of it's local farming. Yeah. Or maybe not. It's really easy to, if you have percentages like that you're bringing in from different places, it's really easy to like move things around how you need to.
And when you guys talk about limestone, is the limestone in the area that you were saying it's hard to grow white wine grapes, or is it?
No, it's in the high plains. Like the limestone's in the high plains where it's easier to grow
white wine grapes.
And a lot of that's just because of the cool nights and the diurnal shift. And
because when I think of limestone, I think of white wine.
Well, that's where all the white wines grow.
It's all up there.
Yeah.
And
we have some limestone in the hill country, but the hill country is just tough because we're so warm and so humid that our nights don't cool off. We struggle to retain any acidity in
that first white
in
that
a
you
lot
had,
of fruit.
Ironically, we're talking about
this is
that
hill
is the
country
hill country
white.
Cool.
Cool.
But it's, to me, you have to make it in this style, a little bit bigger, a little riper fruit, just because it gets so hot. So you don't have, we're not going for that really lean, crisp wine because it's just like hard to produce that in the hill country.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk distribution.
Yeah. So what's up? How come you guys have challenges getting some of these wines in California?
Because California doesn't
want wine from any other region.
See, and this was a surprise to me because, I buy wines from all over the world when I go to like Bottle Barn in Santa Rosa, right?
Yeah, that's through an importer, though. It's a little different. It's a challenge even to ship wine. Like when we have wine club members. Yeah, when we have wine club members that are people that have come in from California to like, hey, I heard Texas is doing some really cool stuff. Which is like for us, we're like, yay, they're coming to see us. Yeah. We're doing it. And they're like, man, these are incredible wines. We want to sign up for your wine club. It cost us like 5 times as much to ship wine into California
than any other state.
Wait a minute. Seriously?
Yeah.
Need to have a little freethegrapes.org chat.
Yeah, it's a challenge. And distribution has like, it's all driven by money and the lobbyists and legislators. That,
I mean, here we are. We're the ones complaining about all the states that we want to be able to ship our grapes to.
but it's big industry out here. So if you think about it, you just follow the logic behind it. Like, it's one of the major industries of your state, and if someone's impeding on it, we're going to make it as hard as possible for you to be able to like transact and do things across state lines.
I mean, this is my ignorance, but I guess I'm really disappointed to hear that, because we talk about how we want to be able to ship our grapes to, Michigan and
Free
trade. And,
you want them going out, but you definitely don't.
No,
want them coming back in.
that's what I'm hearing. But I guess again, my ignorance that I just assumed that we were
being cool.
We were being cool. We were supporting the industry in general because, as tides rise, we all rise, and that's really interesting. Do you guys know about? I mean, so is the Wine Institute? Is Wine Institute only a California? No, it's nationwide.
No, it's nationwide.
And so freethegrapes.org, are you guys familiar with that?
I'm not, but I'm going to look it up right now.
You should, and we can put you in touch with some people, because I don't know.
Who will basically lobby on your behalf?
Cool.
Actual lobby, try and change laws.
Very cool.
Freethegrapes.org.
Yeah, it's
Nice. New Jersey. We have issues with that too. Anyway, I'm from there.
Yeah, there's a bunch of states that are not a bunch, just a few that are like, absolutely not. You are not shipping alcohol into our state.
So what's it cost to ship a case of wine to California? Do you know off the top of your head? $100.
Which, I mean, so
But the tax that we pay to California is what is the highest of any other state.
Right.
I can't say off the top of my head what
what it costs for you to
import the product into the state.
What it costs for you to be licensed in California to ship here legally.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is the highest of any other state.
Yeah.
what was that wine that's in my glass? This is a Petit Syrah? Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, this is Petit Syrah. This comes out of the hill country as well. A vineyard called Uplift that we farmed with William Chris, and William Chris actually has a brand out there that's 100% estate off this vineyard called Uplift.
And is that a rendition of the actual vineyard?
That is just some artwork that we did when we started. Are you talking about the label itself?
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool now because like we've kind of gone to this newer.
Yeah.
When we started the winery, like we wanted it to be very, very clear that this is Texas and like everything that we're doing. So we utilized the shape, very notable.
I guess what I was really getting at is that rock outcropping.
Yeah, it's kind of a cool.
I mean, that's what a draw is.
It is.
Yeah, that's a rendition of the Lost Draw vineyard, the original one.
That's
barn
where the
and
name,
the windmill are on there.
Yeah.
The name comes from is a draw. A lot of people like don't know what that is, but in the High Plains, it's a dry creek bed. And if you've ever been to the High Plains, it's very flat. There's no aspect. There's not even trees. It's flat, kind of desolate looking land, but it has these giant rain events that happen for all the reasons we talked about earlier with the weather patterns that are meeting. And just over, hundreds and thousands of millions of years, the runoff has created these dry creek beds, and they're called draws. And the really large ones are named, and all of the naming happened from like Western settlement as people were like moving in and moving west. You've all heard the history books talk about moving west, but once you got to the area above the Cap Rock, it was just so desolate. There was no landmarkers or features that you could actually identify for like travel to and from them, except for these draws. And so the draws, the larger ones, were all named back mostly in the late 1800s to early 1900s as people were settling that area. And where we planted the grapes is adjacent to like a very pronounced area of the draw, Lost Draw. So we called it Lost Draw Vineyard. And very like fortunately for us, we planted it on like the highest elevation part of it, which helps us through like frost and freeze events that happen because the cool air always follows the draw and kind of leaves the grapes on top of it alone.
Yeah.
So
it
was kind of a
this
happy
wine
accident.
screams Petit Syrah. So if your intention was to make make a Petite Sirah. I mean, it's varietally it to me.
Yeah, and this is a single vineyard wine, so all our single vineyard wines, we are really trying to showcase the expression of the variety grown on that space.
Beautiful.
Yeah, Petite Sirah, that's a grape that Andrew and I love. We do some out of the hill country, some out of the high plains every year. We produce a lot of Sangiovese. Sangiovese and Tempranillo are probably our two biggest red wine SKUs at the winery, but Petite Sirah is just like a great wine to have in your toolbox, for things like that.
Yeah.
And so
percent here, 2% there.
Yeah, so it finds its way. We nickel and dime it into a lot of wines, but we go out of our way every year to at least produce one Petite Sirah that we think is like the best showcase of that year or that vineyard.
Yeah, I love the acid on it.
Yeah,
fucking great. All the wines are great.
Thanks.
Yeah,
that's the goal, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I just want to make sure people hear me say it. Yeah, the wines are fucking great.
All right, so let's talk about people that would come to visit you. What's it like to come tasting there? Appointments, drive-bys. Do you have events that you put on? What about that? Festivals?
Yeah, there's some really great wine festivals and a lot of great work that's been done by Texas Hill Country Wineries Association and the Texas Wine Growers to be able to host people to see multiple places. And there's like a passport that is pretty successful in the area. I know that pretty much every region has some version of that, but to me, that's the best way to go see a bunch of wineries and not have to pay, the $30 tasting fee at every place. And don't get me wrong, I love it when people come out and taste
wait
the
a
wines.
minute. You just said everybody's got that. I mean, is this a year-round thing? Like you're just coming out and you can buy a passport and go to multiple wineries, or is it like for an event?
Right now it's seasonal, so there's 4 passports, at least through our Hill Country organization, that run for a certain amount of time. We will likely for 2026, if we can get it done, but we're working through the organization right now to have an annual one. So you purchase it and it'll run for a full year. So you would be able to, if you're coming out, just purchase a passport and run around to a bunch of wineries.
Like a ski pass.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but that's the best way to go see it. It's super easy to make reservation on our website, lostdraw.com. We love having people to the winery that have never been and experience it for the first time. It's a full production winery with the vineyard there, so we try to stay pretty small and intimate in the fact that if you ask hey, can I go look at the vineyard or see production, we don't charge you a nominal fee to go look at things. It's no, I want people to be educated on what we're doing here. So we actually encourage our team to take guests to check it out and become more integrated in the processes and to see the oak foudres that we talk about in the winemaking process. This is what it actually looks like.
Go see a concrete egg. Go see when we have sheep in the vineyard. Go see the bees we have.
Well, that's cool. They kind of stopped doing shit like that around here 10, 15 years ago because too many lawyers get involved in it, especially during harvest. They don't want you anywhere near machinery. But
it doesn't surprise me. Yeah.
We run.
All it takes is one idiot to fall into a tank.
Yeah.
The lawyers are the only ones making money in the Texas wine industry.
So tell us a little bit about your wine club.
We have a traditional wine club, and then we're exploring this new allocation process, but it's not completely ironed out. But we release seasonal wines. The 24 SKUs that we talked about earlier are generally major programs that we do for the wine club releases, and comes with a lot of cool benefits. To me, the best benefit is that we do these wine dinners, like wine club dinners, that are open to the public, but they're complimentary if you're a club member. And then our release parties are pretty similarly set up to how the traditional wine club events run in other
So are the dinners done at the winery, or do you partner with restaurants and have them at restaurants?
Both. So some are done completely in-house. We are pretty consistent with traditional Texas fare. We do a lot of open fire cooking. That's just like kind of traditional Texas fare, and we do a lot of that for the events.
Cool.
And try to always like give people a unique culinary experience, because I think there's too many times that we don't, like as a just national industry, talk about like you don't have to have like the most eloquent food option to when you're enjoying wine. Like you can actually have different things that are easy to prepare, that actually pair very well with the stuff we're doing. So we usually kind of have a good variety of both of those things. Cool.
Hey, don't sell our parties short. Like we throw some pretty awesome.
I think
wine
what
club
he's
parties.
saying is there is bread.
Yeah, there's bread. Yeah. No, I mean, we pride
There's
ourselves.
bread.
A big thing we do for all of our pickup parties is like we feed all the members, like complimentary. That's not
like
a thing that
400
like
to
anyone else
500
is doing
people.
anymore.
Yeah. Wow.
Like Andrew's father-in-law, Troy, he's out there with his buddies on a pit. Like Andrew raises pigs. He does a bunch of show pigs. We use a lot of that meat when we can. We partner with a farmer out in Kerrville that runs Wagyu cattle. Like we buy in on that. We keep that. We use that for dinners. We run the Wagyu stuff.
Fucking hype man right here.
Exactly. Maybe you need a new winemaker because you got a marketing guy here.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the biggest perks for the club. Like when we talk to our club members that come out, it's like y'all throw a badass party. You got live music. Like you literally just have like 6 guys hanging around a pit cooking food for us. Like we're watching it all happen out here in the field.
I think
like,
there's
a
a
very
lot of-
family feel to it all.
Yeah, I think a lot of places try like to, they like look at the wine club release like, oh, we got to do a wine club release. I'm like, I love these things. Like it's like a giant reason for us to like get together. It's almost like a family reunion. You're like cooking food for 400 people and just having wine, celebrating. We're celebrating releases.
Right.
Like this is not like an obligation to, you know.
I mean, it's, the wine industry for so long did everything it could to make, oh, it's a special event and only, you have to be invited. And really what it is, it's get wine in their glass and get food in their mouth, and let them figure out what they think it pairs best with.
Yeah.
We do an amazing crawfish boil also at the winery.
Oh, yeah.
Like we're neighbors with Louisiana. We're best crawfish farms in the country, and we have a couple farmers, producers of crawfish that will like actually bring crawfish to us, like fresh catch, bring it in. We boil it all there. That's like probably one of our biggest events every year.
For anyone that's familiar with H-E-B, the greatest grocery store chain in the country, it's in Texas. You can look up Lost Straw H-E-B and you can see what Andrew looks like, because we ran a crawfish commercial for like 5 years.
Is that right?
All about our
partnered with
crawfish
them,
party. Yeah.
I'll never forget the first time I walked into HEB and they were like, you had to go in this door, and they brought you through the store. Like it was amazing.
It's an experience.
It's an experience.
Yeah, that's why they're so successful. They think about everything very detail oriented.
And do you have good support by like stores like that?
Yeah, there's several really good grocery store chains that do support local very well. HEB is definitely one of them.
All right. Well, why don't you shout out if you have some event that's coming up in the next couple months that you can shout out. Shout it out now, so that way if people are listening, I mean, some people may not hear it till the end, but shout it out now. And
Sure, yeah. One of the big things that we are doing to try to, create some uniqueness to our club is we are doing member events in other cities. So the next ones that we have coming up are at the very end of this month or next month. So July 31st and August 1st, we're doing a 2-part event in the DFW area. One's in Fort Worth, one's in McKinney, which is just north of Dallas. And we want to invite all of our members from that area, or even not from that area, if you want to make the trip with us. But that's one of our big initiatives, is getting out to meet our wine club members where they're at, and not just expect them to just pick up everything and drive 3.5 hours or 2 hours to come to our event. We're going to try to host some stuff in their place. So that's what we have coming up.
Sorry, I got some people at the door.
No, that's all right. So listen, so it's shout out the website,
Lostdraw.com, LOSTDRAW.
Cool.
Follow us on Instagram. We're doing some pretty fun stuff on there.
Yeah, just at Lost Draw.
Yeah, it's just at Lost Draw Wines.
At Lost Draw Wines.
You can see us in pink crop tops dancing to Pink Pony Club.
That does not sound good.
It's pretty funny.
Yeah,
I guess that'd be all deadhead.
Thank you guys for coming today. Appreciate you. And like I said,
thanks for having us.
The wines are great.
Yeah. Thanks for inviting us over today to
Hopefully
hang out a
it'll make
little
it a little easier to get them here.
We'll stay in touch on
That's
it.
funny that was news to us. We're like, really? It's hard to send us wine? I just got to mention a couple things. So this episode is coming out on Friday. On Sunday, July. Oh, yeah. I guess we're releasing a show on 4th of July, huh? Do you go downtown on 4th of July?
So my good friend AJ lives at the beginning of the parade.
Oh, I was told to ask you about this, actually.
Well, so it's gin fizzes to start off the morning.
Yeah.
To start at 8. And it
we
all
didn't
kind
bring
of
those
rolls from
today.
there.
Yeah.
I don't make the gin fizzes. Got
They're
to
not
shout out
easy to
Uncle
make.
Val's.
That's not a fun thing. Bartenders hate that shit when you come in on Sunday brunch and you order a gin fizz.
Well, they got it.
Get out
These
the
guys got it
eggs.
down. So yeah, I come down for the parade, and then we usually go on and do something.
Okay. Yeah, someone actually asked me at the Rhone Rangers yesterday if you were at that party off the square and that I was supposed to get the info so we could go crash it.
Yeah.
All right, perfect. We're closed on Friday, and I didn't understand why. And Jasmine, because I'm normally up in Downeyville. Jasmine's like, you have no idea what goes on in Sonoma. On
Yeah,
4th of July.
and wineries don't need to be open on 4th of July. I mean, there's certain holidays. I think it's just too much redundancy.
Well, once you recovered on Saturday, we are having our first Vinyl Sunday event this Sunday, July 6th. Hattie Craven is playing on the back porch. And I can't promise, but usually her dad, Joe, shows up and plays with her. We'll be pouring some of the new EV wines. And then we got the Costa's Tacos doing the food for us. And then more events to come. Stanley Mouse Appreciation Party coming in August. We got International Grenache Day coming in September. And then the big event in October with Reed Mathis and the Abbey Roads. And I did just lock down the opener for that event, and I'm not allowed to say it until I coordinate with her PR people. So I'm waiting for Sam to get home. So it's a big fucking deal. It's going to be an amazing.
Is it bigger than the headliner?
I mean, to some people it will be actually. Yeah. So it's going to be but you can buy tickets right
Talk about
now.
a teaser.
If you go on the website and go to the events page, you can buy the tickets, and I recommend doing that because once her PR people coordinate this release, then tickets are going to sell out fast. And then Barbara Gorder is now, running the entire DTC Wine Symposium, which is happening January 20th, 21st, 22nd in Monterey. You can still get good ticket prices from now until July 8th. So you have until, Tuesday? The big draw for me is that she did get Elaine Chuck and Brown, the Hawk Waka Waka, the Sardonic Meatball.
Yep.
Is going to be the keynote speakers. So
And Dusty Eskis, also another keynote speaker, and she's such a dynamic person. I don't care what she's talking about. You're gonna walk away feeling ready to take on anything.
And we had a lot of fun last year. I mean, we met people from all over the United States. Some of them had come to the DTC symposium because they heard about it on this podcast.
Yeah.
So hopefully we'll see you there.
Maybe
again.
some guys from Texas will come for the direct-to-consumer.
Love to have you guys there. All right, you want to mention anything, and then I got to get out of here and get these people.
Make reservations at the tank, DaneCellars.com. Plenty of reservations open. We are doing our cruise a year from now with the folks at Cline Cellars. So hit me up for information about that. Drink more wine. Check out Texas Wines.
Hell yeah.
And if you're heading to Austin, go hang out with these guys.
When you guys are in what? Is it Johnson City?
Johnson City. That's
Johnson
where Lyndon
City.
Baines Johnson
Yeah.
is from.
Yeah.
Cool.
So.
Cool.
Thanks,
Awesome.
guys.
Thanks,
Yeah.
guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank y'all.
Appreciate it.
Cheers.